Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Teresa Lamb with MicroAccounting. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Sage Intacct webinar. We'll be talking about bank reconciliations today. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We do have all of the lines muted. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to put those in the question or chat pane, and we'll be monitoring those, and we'll try to answer them during the webinar, but if not, we'll certainly take down your information and get back with you, or if it's something specific to your environment that we can't necessarily answer in general, we'll certainly get back with you and follow up with you. So with that, Nick Ori on our team is going to be doing our webinar today. So I believe he's sharing his screen. Everybody should be able to see that okay. And so we will get started. Take it away, Nick.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Teresa. So hello, Nick Ori, consultant with MicroAccounting on Sage Intacct. So honestly, this could be, we could take the full hour if I'm not mistaken, or it could go a little bit quicker. It depends on some things that may be out of my control as far as importing some files, but nevertheless. So today we're going to talk about the bank reconciliation in Intacct. There's been some new features that have been released by Sage that really kind of, in my opinion, changes the game for doing your bank reconciliations. To give you all a little context, I worked about 15 years in corporate treasury at a company prior to MicroAccounting, so I am very familiar with the nuances of, the bank activity and how we're reconciling it to our, accounting system. And so I will be the first to tell you, I kind of nerd out on bank reconciliations, which says a whole lot about me. But at any rate, so new stuff that has come out. One of the big ones is there is now a bank transaction assistant within Intacct. I'll tell you now that it does require subscribing to it to enable it. I am directing every client I have that is not able to have the bank feeds directly set up with their bank. I am pointing them to the bank transaction assistant because it just truly is changing the game of how we're able to see transactions and fire off and create match rules to where you can get a more precise rules based on your transactions. So historically, before this, you would import the bank transactions or the bank statement, if you will, when you're doing the reconciliations in Intacct on that bank reconciliation screen. One of the issues that I always had with it is that's the only place that those transactions are shown, right? Is you have to go into the bank recon. With the bank transaction assistant import, those imports now will show up in your bank transactions. So you don't have to go to the reconciliation to see it. You can see it in your bank transaction list view, which also is huge for being able to create, those precise match rules, create rules, so on and so forth. So I can guarantee you, with the import of your bank statements, and let me add a little caveat to this, you can import into the bank transaction assistant, the bank transactions, you can do that on a daily basis, a weekly basis, or a monthly basis, or whatever frequency with which you want. So that's super duper nice that you can bring in those multiple, daily files, even, if you will. So with that, when you're bringing over those bank transactions, being able to identify those and have the match and create rules is truly going to reduce your staff's bank reconciliations. I can guarantee you that. I have some clients that they had probably 10 bank accounts that they had to reconcile, and it would take them 3 to 4 days, and we're talking about tens of thousands of lines of data, transactions from their bank. And so it went from, anywhere from a week to 10 days to about a day, honestly. So try that on. It's using the system. I like to say, think of it, all of your, create rules and match rules that you're doing as a treasury person when you're doing the reconciliation. It's based on your knowledge of what that is, right? So let's just take a super, super simple example of check 1010, right? For $1,000. When you have that on your bank statement, and I go way back, I would have the bank statement printed out in front of me, right? And I'd go, okay, that's check number 1010 for $1,000. And then I'd look at my accounting system and see, okay, that's check number 1010 for $1,000. Everything, when you think of it, when you did the reconciliation, was based on some sort of a rule, more or less. Okay. It was all in your head, but nevertheless, you had rules that govern how you're doing that reconciliation. The big thing is the setup, as with everything, setup is a little, little in depth, right? Takes a little while to do those setups, but you're going to do it based on that rule, those rules that are in your head that have governed you for eternity on doing your reconciliations. So in getting that out of your head onto, into Intacct, you can have Intacct say, hey, look, I know when I see a check number that matches between the bank and Intacct and the amount matches, you can do multiple criteria on those matches. Intacct will say, if all these criteria match, I'll go ahead and reconcile it for you. I'll go ahead and put it as cleared, if you will. It won't do the complete reconciliation. You still have to have that human, review, if you will. But it will do all of the matches for you to where your discrepancies on remaining amounts to match could very well end up being zero in some cases. So another feature that has come out is the inter-entity journals. So this was one of the things that I actually recommended. I'm not going to take credit for them to actually do it because a lot of people liked the idea and recommended it. So when you think of if you have between two separate bank accounts a transfer, and those two bank accounts are actually at two separate entities, Intacct now, when you do make a create rule that will say, hey, when on bank A, when I see $10,000 and I have certain criteria that says if it's a fund transfer or ZBA, if you will, to this other bank account, you put in that criteria, which is at another entity, Intacct will automatically create those debits and credits in Intacct, but it takes it another step and it will do, based on your inter-entity mapping, it will go ahead and create those due to from entries for both entities, which to me is another big thing, right? So, end of month, you see your inter-entity, balance is, $10,000. You can tell your treasury team, hey, go ahead and make the transfer to the, other entity, and the recording of that will be captured by Intacct on that bank feed and or the bank transaction import. So it really takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. You can really get down into, all the details of what you're shooting for. As I alluded to earlier, the bank transaction assistant file import, it does make it easier to import and review transactions. We're going to go over that in a minute to just show you where you can go to see where those transactions are going to start to appear. And then also the new bank transaction assistant import does allow for more file types to be imported. I'll leave it at that. There is some tweaking that is still being done with the file type imports. But historically, it had to be a CSV file that you did on your reconciliation, that initial reconciliation screen. But now it allows for multiple CSV files. What was the other one? OFX file, which actually I do have a client that is able to download an OFX file from their bank. The OFX files, the BAI files, and I'm going to air quote BAI because we're working through some issues with it, but nevertheless, those files are intended to be, you download them from your bank and then you immediately import them into Intacct. There's no editing to those files. It should be a seamless, smooth transition. If your bank is not able to provide the certain file types that Intacct requires, that's okay, because they do have CSV file, Excel file templates that you can manipulate your export in from bank to the import file for Intacct and bring those in. So gives you a lot more robust file types. And I will say, for those translation of the export from your bank account activity, that usually it's an Excel file to a Intacct import file. I don't know, some of y'all on the call have worked with me before. I am very proficient at writing essentially templates that will take your data and bring it into an Intacct import. So feel free, if that's something that interests any of y'all, feel free to reach out to us on that. So anyways, so here's the list of those files. Look at me getting ahead of myself, right? So BAI, XML, text files, OFX, ASO. I'm not going to read all those off because that's quite a few files. I did note on there the CSV, Excel, and the Excel files must conform to Intacct import templates, which we just discussed. And then, so once you have those files formatted correctly to where we can do the import, and this is the outlier for if you can't have bank feeds set up. Once those are brought in, then we'll analyze the imported transactions, which we're going to go over. We're going to look at exactly where those transactions populate in Intacct, to where then you can make those create and match rules to kind of work through what the criteria will be. And then, for those of y'all that are familiar with Intacct, once you create a rule, a match or create rule, then you have to add it to a rule set. So we'll get into that here in a little bit. Okay, so one of the things on the rule sets is you can create as many rules as you want. I've never ran out of space on doing the rules, but as I alluded to, you'll have to create a rule set. And so what that rule set is it is a set of all of your match and create rules. In the rule sets, it does do it by priority. Okay, so this is a screenshot from the help menu in Intacct, just FYI. And one of the big things that we want to focus on is you want to have your match rules first. Because again, in your rule set, it's going to go order. So the first one is going to fire first. The next rule will fire then, so on and so forth. So you want your super specific, you want all your match rules to fire first, because if your accounting team has already made these entries or certain entries, as inevitably they will have, you'll want those match rules to where Intacct's not saying, okay, I'm going to create this transfer right off the bat, right? So in the example I gave earlier, if your treasury team made that transfer and then they did book it, as opposed to waiting for the bank transactions import, you would not want a create rule ahead of your match rules in that instance, because the entry is already in your in Intacct, to where we want Intacct to try and match it first. So that's what Intacct will do. It'll say, okay, I see this $1,000. I see the criteria for a transfer from or to or whatever the descriptive criteria is, and it'll match that. And then essentially when it matches it, it reduces that list that it's working from on the bank transactions to where, okay, I found that $1,000. I've already dealt with that. I don't have to worry about that. So none of the other rules will apply to that $1,000 at that point. Okay. If your treasury team has not entered that transaction, then it's going to look for the match first, and when it doesn't see that match, it's going to go to the next one, the next rule, and eventually it will carry down to your create rule that's going to say, hey, if we have ZBA to this certain bank account in the description, book this entry. And once it gets to that order, that rule number in the order, that's when that rule will fire. So it does it based on a priority. Again, this is a good example of, what you're kind of governing how you want to do it. I will say on your, deposits is a big one. Usually there's float. If you have merchant services, right? Merchant services are going to usually have anywhere from 1 to 3 day float, and then you have to add in the weekends, right? And so with that, you do the first rule that says, hey, day for day, right? If the days match and the amounts match, reconcile it. I don't even want you to think about it. Then you'll do another rule, match rule, that'll say, hey, if it's within 3 days of what the bank is saying and the amount matches, then you can match it. You can also do groupings of, multiple groups of bank deposits to multiple groups of intact transaction deposits. It will only be based on those transactions that have not been, quote unquote, matched by the system. Okay. So, product demo. Let's hope this works. Let me see where my screeny is, and I'm just going to drag it over, and hopefully this way of shared application. I'm hoping. Oh no, I paused. Hold on, one moment, please. Okay, Teresa, I'm assuming y'all can see my screen of my Intacct environment.
We can, yes.
Yay! So here. So let's kind of dive into the bank transactions. First things first, cash management. There is a configuration. Again, if you need it configured, reach out to us. Because what I will say is if you had bank feeds turned on, and bank feeds, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with them. Sometimes they do wonders, and it makes your life 10 million times easier. Because those feeds are constantly coming over from the bank I think it's on a 4-hour interval. If bank feeds quasi work, which sometimes happens, then in turning on the bank transaction assistant, it actually won't affect your, what was it that affected the bank feeds? It was, gosh, I can't remember now. I know that there was a entry. Oh, it's when you turn off your bank feeds. Sorry. When you turn off, so if you're going to use the bank transaction import in lieu of what you had as bank feeds, when you turn off your bank feeds, the system will warn you to say, hey, you're doing this. Any transactions that have not been matched or reconciled in Intacct are about to go away. So that always makes me a little apprehensive whenever I see, oh, I'm fixing to lose all my transactions. So it's okay as long as you're able to bring in those import files. So again, there is a configuration.
Nick,
yes.
Just to jump in and clarify that, when he says the transactions are going away, it's the bank transactions, not anything you posted in Intacct. It's not affecting anything posted. It's just those transactions on the bank file for matching purposes.
Correct. Thank you for that clarification. Yes. So it again, as Teresa alluded to, it's not your actual posted transactions that, that your AP team has posted or, payroll team, anything like that. It is purely based on a bank transaction that will go away. Okay. So nevertheless, now we have, if you've turned on that functionality, now you'll see in your system with permissions allowed, you'll now see the bank transaction import files icon. And you've always had the bank transaction tab. So we're going to dive kind of into the bank transactions first, just to show you. And I did a demo import. So I did July already. So this is to show you, I imported my July transactions in prior to the webinar. And from your bank transactions, your bank transactions list view, you're able to see, hey, here's what are my the descriptions I have in here, right? So this is a new thing. When you would import, when you were doing the actual reconciliation, you never had transactions show up, the bank transactions to show up in the bank transactions drop down, okay, or list view. Now with the new assistant import, you will see those. The great thing of that is now we can start to look at, hey, what is this discrete? Is this something that I can key on for a create or match rule? Okay, now keep in mind, I kept this really, really simple. Okay, I didn't want to get too down in the weeds of it, but I have a transaction that's funds transfer. I have we bought $5,000 worth of computers. Everything else is going to be a deposit. So with that, you're going to see that they've all been cleared because I already did the July bank recon, if you will. But from it, we also included a match sequence, which is a super nice little tool. It's going to give you, there is a report, and I can't remember if I activated it on my demo, but we'll look in a minute, to where it's going to show you that side-by-side comparison in a report of here's the bank transaction and here's the corresponding Intacct transaction that the bank rules fired for. So super nice that you don't have to go to each single transaction. So case in point, I have this computers for $5,000, right? Well, and it says it matched, right? It gave me a match sequence, but what did it match to? Because maybe I have 50, $5,000 entries. So I want to make sure that the rule did pick up on that document number, right? So you could always go in and view that and see that this top portion here is from your bank import, your bank activity import, okay? Down below where it says match transactions, that is your Intacct transaction. Okay, so that's where you could see check number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we had a document up here from the bank transaction import of 00123455. Now, in Intacct, we're going to look at the rule that was associated with this. We can tell it, hey, if the bank is populating leading zeros, which a lot of banks do, we can, and if in Intacct we are not capturing that leading zero, we're just doing the straight run, numbers on it without the leading zeros, we can tell on that match rule to say, hey, drop your leading zeros on the bank to where it's going to match a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we didn't drop that leading zero, then this would not match because it's going to see it as a different document number. Okay. To go into it a little bit further, we can go, on the Intacct transaction, you can click on that and it's going to take you to what entry that was created. Yes, I did import it as a journal entry as opposed to running it through AP. But nevertheless, if it was an AP entry, it would take you, if you have those permissions turned on for drill down, it would take you all the way down to the AP bill. So again, nice little feature to be able to say, hey, what was this for? And then conversely, why did you match it correctly? Okay. So the next piece of this is going to be, and I need to see if I do not have that report. Okay, shame on me. I didn't add the report. There is a report that would show you the side-by-side comparison of what your reconciliation from bank and Intacct is. I didn't install it on my demo. I do apologize. Nevertheless, so on your rules, this is where it gets super duper fun to me. So I have, random rules all throughout here. A lot of them are say test, so shame on me. So let's look at the check match, because that's the one that we just got through looking at, right? And so we'll go in and view this. So, well, actually we'll hit edit just for fun, just so you can see really what the screen is. So on your match rules, this is only pertaining to match rules. You can, well, both match and create rules can be filtered. However, match rules do not require a filter. Create rules do require a filter. Okay. So want to make that little nugget crystal clear. So I'm not going to filter any of the transactions because I feel confident in that. Is my screen showing fine, Teresa? Because I keep getting all over the place on my audience view.
It
Hope it
is,
is.
yes.
Okay. Sorry. So I'm not going to put any filtering on the criteria. You certainly could. You could say, hey, I want to, for checks, for example, I could say, hey, I only want the bank transaction type is equal to, and on the bank side, that would be a no, that is a debit on the bank side. On the Intacct side, it would be a credit to reduce your cash, right? So we can say, all right, these are for checks. I want to filter the transactions by bank transactions that are debits. Okay, we can. My point is down here, you're able to, on your matching conditions, again, this is a required piece for the matching, go figure, is that you have a document number, posting date, description, amount, and then you have a document number here, leading zeros removed. That is, again, why on that check number, we were able to have it drop those leading zeros. And we're saying equals to, and then this is the criteria for Intacct, right? So we're going to match document number, amount to amount. So that's how Intact's going to work it. It's going to say, hey, if I have a match on my document numbers and amounts, I actually, the more I think about it, I probably would put a filter on this. Due to your deposits. So sometimes your deposits don't come over with a document number, right? And we said that was going to be a debit on the bank side. Your bank transactions may not come over with, most of them don't come over with a document number. And so if you don't have that filter criteria for just the debit values, what it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, document number is blank in both places. I'm going to reconcile it, right? Because it's not going to know, again, you have to tell the system you're looking at. So again, if we didn't have that filter criteria in there, when it sees a deposit, it's going to say, all right, document number is 0 on this, and bank said it's 0, the amount matches, move on. Some of y'all may be okay with that. That might be acceptable. I would go the additional step with your deposits, create a separate rule that says based on the posting dates. Big believer in that, highly recommend doing that. All right, so we will save this because I did update it. And then we're going to look at that funds transfer. So this is going to be a create rule. So on my create rule, again, from that, and I'll duplicate just to show you that bank transaction that we had. All right, so here's our bank transaction, right? So when we view it, we imported it in, and let's say it didn't fire. Well, from this, we can say, hey, in my description, this is the description. that I want you to base the create rule on. So as I said, when it is a create rule, you do have to filter your transactions. So we're doing the bank transactions by a posting date greater than 6/30. You have to have a posting date filter in it for create rules. System, you'll hit save and it'll say, hey, you have to tell me when this rule is to start. Okay. And then the flip side is the next one is bank transaction description. And the operators are equals, contains, does not contain, begin with, ends with. Got a little bit of flexibility there. I use contains because this is pretty, that's one of those things when you have a ZBA, it says ZBA to, whatever the bank account number is. You can have that specific criteria. I still do it as contains. Just in the event the bank changes something, on those descriptions, you would still have these rules fire off potentially based on looking at that criteria. Okay. So now down here where on the match rule we had match criteria, now we have defined the transaction to create. So you have two drop downs. One's for, oh, now it's three. No, it's two. Credit card transaction and journal entry. So we're going to want a journal entry to be posted here. And I have already created the journal entry template, if I'm not mistaken. Transaction template for journal entry. That's what it's called. Thank you. So on that, this is just telling Intacct. And case in point on the journal, anytime I'm using create rules, I always create a new journal that is called bank feeds. I just like to have those separated out from like a GJ or anything else to where I can identify really quick what, if something is posting incorrectly, I can go find that really quick because it's now bank feed, right? Journal entry. Still will hit whatever books you want, so on and so forth, based on your journal, the way you set up your journal. But I do like having that as a separate journal. Okay. And so the offsetting entry. So offsetting entries, this is truly the offset. Intacct is going to make, when it does a create rule on the bank account GL, the GL that is associated with the bank account that you're bringing these transactions in, it's going to make that entry based on your configuration of your bank account. Okay. This is the part where you need to tell it, what's that other side of the entry, right? We already know the bank transactions coming in and it needs to post to my bank account. What's the offset? So the offset in this case is going to be my other GL for my other bank account. You can do allocations. This is transaction allocations. A lot of times what I like to think of is if you had bank fees, F-E-E-S, not feeds. I always struggle with that because I'm from Texas. Anyways, if you have bank fees that you are wanting to allocate based on a percentage to the various entities or locations or whatever that criteria is that you want to transactionally allocate, this is where you can do that. You can set up that allocation and then select it here. And what Intact's going to do is the offset. It's going to go ahead and split that based on whatever that allocation criteria is. Okay. Also, as with everything in Intacct, on your transaction entries, you can identify a dimension value of employee or customer or vendor. I do have one client that they're bringing in transactions from specific payers, and they want to capture that. So we would create the criteria that says, hey, this is from Nick Ori, right? Look for the description that says Nick Ori. And then when you find that Intacct and you're going to do the create, I want you to put it to the customer Nick Ori. So it's another level of being able to identify. So you can set up these criteria, the offset to hit whatever dimensional values you want. Okay. And then department location, your memo. So on your memo, what's going to happen is on the create rule, the memo line that it creates is going to be based on the description from the bank feed or the bank transaction, if you will. Okay, so that's what's going to populate in your memo field. All right, I don't think I made any changes to that, so I'll cancel that, but I will not save that either. Okay, one other thing is going to be my rule sets. So, oh lordy, which one did I do it to? Let me look real quick. No, I know which one it is. Do I? No, I don't. Hold on. Let me go look at my demo and see which rule set I have. Applied rule set is 3, so we'll view it from here. All right, so this is the rule set that I have associated with my demo account. Again, that was where on the other slide we had, hey, priority matters, right? We need to make sure that these are in order. So actually, yeah, that's more of a generic, so that's okay. Well, no, document number and date match. Actually, I would probably move that up. But the point is your rule type, your matches are always going to be first. You always want to have your match rules before your create rules. I think I've already explained why, so we won't, go into that any further. So I have a check match, right? I have a simple amount, document number, date match. Okay. Match concentration transfers, that was testing for something else. And then I have that deposit match, right? So again, that's where I would say on that check match, doing that criteria, the filter by those bank transaction debits. And then on your deposit match, you would want to do bank transaction credits from the bank side. And then we have, finally, we have that create rule for the inter-entity, the transfer that's going to come over, right? So again, keep it in order and it's going to fire. It's going to look for your checks first, then it's going to do the next rule, then the next rule, then the next rule, and then it's going to get into your create rules. Your create rules, you want those specific those more detailed create rules to go first. What for one client, I think we ended up with, good God, I think 15 create rules for specific payers. And then the very last rule was, what's my catch-all? If none of these criteria hold true and we still have transactions left over after all the match and create rules happen, what's my catch-all for these deposits? Okay, so again, it's another means of, I don't need to go in and identify these every single time. Okay. From this rule set, you could also look at your rule performance log. We can look at that on a different screen. Keep in mind on this, you can create one on the fly, or you can select the rules. So selecting the rules, you could go in here, select those, add them, close. So you can match an individual rule to multiple rule sets. There is no restriction with that. What you cannot do, you can't match a bank account to multiple rule sets. It can only be a one-to-one relate. It can only be not a one-to-one. Bank accounts can only have one rule set. Multiple rule sets can be applied to multiple. One rule set can be applied to multiple bank accounts. Case in point, when we click over on the account, I have 2 bank accounts that I've applied this rule set to. Okay, and again, from here we can do select the accounts, select any additional ones that are here, and then save those, and that will apply this rule set to those bank accounts when we do the reconciliation. Okay. So I will forewarn you, we're fixing to go into something. Oh, well, one other thing I want to show you is on your cash management setup, reconciliation transaction templates, here's the journal entry one. And again, this is just another place that you can go to create these without having to do it each time with the match or create rule. I find it, or I'm sorry, not match rule, the create rule. I find it easier to do it when I'm doing the create these journal entries when I'm doing the create rules, because I'm designating what that criteria is that I want for the match or the create. So I find it a little bit easier to do those on the fly. You can select multiple of these create rules multiple create rules can be associated with one transaction template journal entry. Okay, so you do have that overlap. All right, so we're gonna go over. All right, so the new bank file import assistant. So from this, I'm gonna go add, and I'm gonna fair warn you, sometimes it does take a little bit of time to bring these in. I don't know why. So I've already done July, as I showed you. We're going to continue from here, and then here's the screen. Something I found out today. So you can drop and drag your files here. So that's not unlike an attachment in Intacct. What I want to point out, because I just found this today and it kind of changed my whole mindset, is open your file import guide. And so it has CSV 3-column, 4-column, Excel 3-column, 4-column, and then here is the QIF, QF, all that, you know, files downloaded directly from your bank. What I want to point out is on any of these CSV files, when you click Learn More, you can download that CSV example. All that the example is going to have is a date, description, and amount columns. Okay. Hence 3 columns. Anyway, sorry. So here's a problem. I don't have check number in here, right? Where's my check number? How is Intacct gonna match my check number, if you will, right? So when you scroll down, it says additional column, headers, and options. So this is where you can type in your header, check space number, and that is going to be your document number or check number, if you will. Okay, you can also type it in as check number, or document number. So Intacct knows to key on these headers to essentially designate them to document number, which is big for me, right? I did not find that till today, I kid you not. So here's all the different header options you can add to your bank transaction import. I don't think most banks are going to include zip code and address line for like payers or payees, but maybe they do. I seriously doubt they do. But nevertheless, again, this is where you can do a payee name, customer name, so on and so forth, right? So found that today, super useful, especially when you have your match rules based on document IDs. So we'll close this out, and we're going to drop and drag in my CSV file, and then we're going to review the transactions. I told you I was going to take almost the whole hour because we're right on it, but it's okay. Hopefully this will fire off and I can show you how it does the match and create. So when you do that, it's going to say, hey, I need you to review your transactions here. Okay, so on it, it's purely going to be, money in, money out. So yes, I know that I had money out for $5,000, right? That was a computers that we bought. Everything else are pretty much deposits in. You just need to make sure that those align to that degree, because obviously there's going to be criteria for it. If it didn't import incorrectly, you just switch the transaction types. Okay, so we'll confirm the import, and then it'll always give you this warning. So take that with a grain of salt. And then it's also oh, where'd it go? Well, hooey. I hope that didn't mess it up. It did say leave. I promise you it did. It was the leave screen warning. So anyways, hopefully that's working. Let's go look. Okay, so it's loading right here. That screen import, so when I did the bank transaction, I'm adding it, and the screen that popped up just for a brief second was, well, hooey, if I can get it to pop up again. Let me actually select that account. Okay, so here it is, and it was, okay, I just can't get it to replicate. Sorry, just out of luck there. So let's see how long this little guy takes. It's gonna take a little bit of time. While it's doing that, I want to show y'all something real quick, and that is your rule set performance logs. So on your rule set performance logs, again, this is going to be based on, this is going to be to just tell you what the rule has done, right? So it has 5 rules associated with it. Bank transactions processed. It's going to tell you on that. This should be every 4 hours if you have bank feeds. If you don't have bank feeds, it's still going to fire every 4 hours. But it'll only work for new transactions that you're bringing over. So here we have intact transactions processed, bank transactions matched, and then intact transactions created. So I will forewarn you that inter-entity journal didn't work for me earlier this morning. I'm curious to see if I can get it to work now. But anyways, we're going to click on this and see view. So in this rule performance, it's going to say, hey, here's what I did. So case in point, right? Previously, I did not have that filtered criteria for the check match. So all these deposits reconciled based on that rule match. So that makes my point, okay? It's that if you don't have that filter criteria for, those bank debit transactions, it's going to apply that rule to both debits and credits. So these are all deposits that were reconciled based on the check match. Again, this is a nice little feature to be able to go back and go, oh, that's not what we wanted. So keep that in mind. And let's see if our bank transaction, because I'm about as impatient as it gets. Did it happen? Still loading. Okay. So case in point, I want to show you one other thing. No, that's not it. So I intended on, I think we just gotta wait, honestly, because I can bounce around with some filler, but it's not gonna work.
Nick,
Yep.
while that's loading, I did go install that match report. So if you want to go back to the custom reports there.
Thank you. So thank you, Teresa. So that was the match sequencing report that I was talking about that I didn't enable for myself. So once we enable that, cash management reports, custom reports, and then there will be a detail of reconciliation match. So from this report, we're going to say, I want to see that test demo company that I've done, right? Source, yeah, you can filter by your transaction date. We don't have much here, so we're going to go ahead and just view that. And again, this is where I love it. I love it. I love it. So on this, we have, hey, here's the source, which is the bank. And then here is Sage Intacct. Okay. So it's telling you, because now we have that sequence number, it's showing you what it's grouping and how it's grouping it. So again, we can see what's going on here. Okay, how are you reconciling this? You can click on the bank record number, and then that again takes you to your bank transaction to where you can dive down deeper into what that transaction entry was. So big fan of this because again, it makes it a little bit easier for you to be able to identify what it is matching to, right? So love that. Big thing. And as with anything, you can dump it out in Excel, CSV, and really go crazy with the data manipulation, if you will. And then on the customization, again, you can use your match sequencing or your source. We could say, if I just wanted bank, I think, maybe it may show nothing. Yeah, I don't know what the criteria is for the source. Sorry. So we'll have to spin back around to that later. Let's see if that thing imported. Oh, it's still loading. Good night. So okay, we're 50 minutes in. I don't definitively know if it's going to import to where we can run those rules. Shame on me. I really wanted it to though. Anyways, okay, it's spinning. So I'll show you real quick on your reconciliation histories. I have the demo company here that I did just before because it's not demon, because I preemptively, if y'all have been on any of my bank feed webinars, you know how outstanding those usually go. So at any rate, we can look at that reconciliation report, right? We can look at it in CSV, Excel, or PDF. Another big thing, most of y'all may not know, or well, no, y'all most should know, is the outstanding items report. So if you're at the end of the year and you're having to do due diligence on unclaimed property, which we like to call escheatment, this outstanding items report is a super cool tool. You click on it and you can drop it over into CSV. I don't have any outstanding items, but this would give you just a beautiful, super nice list view of your outstanding items for you to do your due diligence on. Okay, so we'll click on the reconciliation report. And we're going to zoom in to this little fella. And again, this is normally what you would have always seen. Even importing your month transactions in, you would have seen this reconciliation report. Again, I like doing the advanced one because it gives you bank transactions that you can go back and reference. So case in point, we see all these cleared, right? We can go back to those bank transactions, demo. Oh, demo, and see that here is the list of those same transactions that were in my bank reconciliation report, right? Which is nice because now I can export those to Excel, CSV, Word, PDF, right? So gives you a little additional overlay, if you will. Let's try one more time before I go ahead and say, yeah, it's still loading. So I will fair warn you, most of my clients, these load really quick. I think my demo environment probably has a lot attached to it, so it's taking it a little bit longer. Usually the files do import quicker. They're not, instant, so you may import them in and go do some other stuff and then come back and see that they've loaded. Okay. So sorry, that makes me sad. So with that, that's kind of your bank reconciliation with the assistant, advanced assistant. I think it is a super powerful tool. Again, I have clients that have, I have a client that I think has 50 rules associated with one rule set that fires off for one of their bank accounts. Again, it makes life easier, right? Because in my view, cash, you've always heard the saying, cash is king. Well, this is kind of those things of getting that reconciliation done quicker to where you can close at least your subledger for AP and, well, at least for cash management, so you can't affect cash any further. So it just speeds up that close process, really does. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude. Sorry, I couldn't get that import file in to show you kind of what it does. T, if you want to take over from here, I'll sure enough let you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we did have a couple of questions that came in. I think you answered most of them as we were going through, but there was one, someone asked if this was an additional subscription for this bank assistant. It's not, it's just part of the product. It was with one of the quarterly releases that this became available. So it does have to be kind of turned on and configured and set up in your system, but we can certainly help with that as you're looking at that, but it is not an additional subscription or additional module that you have to add to your subscription. So and I think, like I said, yeah, go ahead.
And just to add to that, and I think I mentioned it, but I want to be absolutely certain. When you turn on that bank assistant import, your functionality for the import file on the reconciliation page, what we've historically done Intacct, that functionality does go away. So you have to use one or the other.
Yes. Good. Thank you for clarifying that. So this is replacing the traditional bank import. It doesn't affect bank feeds necessarily, although if you're going to import your files manually, you obviously don't want those also being imported in. So there's some kind of nuances to it that making sure that you don't have too many things turned on in the system and working. But please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is on here. Again, this is Teresa. You can reach out to me directly. You can reach out to our support email address if there's anything at all that we can help with. We'd love to hear from you and help you out and get this set up so that we can help streamline your bank recs. With that, in addition, if you have any feedback on our webinars, we are open and always welcome any feedback. So please let us know. If there's something that you'd like to see on a future webinar as well, please let us know. We are open to suggestions on things that you guys as our client base would like to see. We do already have kind of our webinars scheduled out for the rest of the year, but we're not opposed to adding something if there's a need from our clients that they would like to see something, or we'll definitely work on getting that scheduled in for next year. I believe our next webinar in October is on kind of some development type tools and some customization functionality in the system. So please feel free to watch our newsletter if you aren't getting that. Again, reach out to us at support and let us know. We'll make sure you're getting that email to get our newsletters so that you can get signed up for our webinars. So with that, I think we answered all the questions out there. There was one or two in there that are specific to environments. We'll follow up with you guys directly. But we appreciate you joining us, and please reach out to us if there is anything at all that we can help with. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.